everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today we will discuss Active Directory Applications concept. So in this video we will discuss what is connections object, what is KCC, sites, site links, global catalog, all of that. So before start the session, I just wanted to ask, have you ever thought about how every domain controller in an Active Directory environment always has the same information? For example, if you have reset a user password on one domain controller, how does every other domain controller know about that changes? The answer is Active Directory replications. So in this video, we will understand how Active Directory replications works, what the important components are, and how Microsoft makes sure every domain controller stays synchronized automatically. So we will see all of that in this video. Okay. So let's get started. So the very first thing we need to know, like, is that Active Directory uses something called multi-master replications. So what does that mean? It means every writable domain controller can accept changes. There is not one central server that controls everything. For example, suppose you have 5 domain controller, okay, like DC1, DC2, DC3, DC4, and DC5. If an administrator creates a new user on DC1, that changes does not stay only that particular server. Instead of Active Directory automatically share that changes with all the other domain controllers like DC2, DC3, DC4, and DC5. Okay. So the changes that is made on the original domain controller is called an originating update. And when the same change is copied to the remaining domain controller, it's called a replicated update. Okay. So this process happens continuously in the background. So every domain controller eventually has the same informations. Okay. So that's how it's worked. Now let's see what is connections object. So think of a connection object as an instruction that tells one domain controller where it should receive replications data from. Here, one important thing we need to remember is that like connections object is one way. For example, DC2 may receives update from DC1. That doesn't mean like DC1 receives updates from DC2. Okay, so if like communications is required in both directions, then Active Directory should create another separate connection object. Okay, and these connection objects are stored under the destinations domain controller and TDS settings. Okay, so normally administrator don't need to create them manually. So the KCC, the knowledge consistency checkers, creates them automatically. So if you open Active Directory site and services, you will see them marked as automatically generated. So you can see under this informations under the site and services. Okay. Now let's see what is KCC. KCC means knowledge consistency checker. So like who creates all the connections object? Think of a school with several classrooms. Each classroom has one student who is responsible for sharing announcement with another classroom. Now imagine there are 10 classrooms. If every classroom tried to talk to other classroom, it would become a messy and confusing. So the school appoints a coordinator. Okay, so the coordinator decide who should share informations with whom. So that makes sure everyone eventually gets the same announcement without creating unnecessary communications. So in the Active Directory, the knowledge consistency checker or KCC works like that coordinator. So every domain controller has its own KCC running in the background. So its jobs to automatically decide like which domain controller should replicate with each other inside the same Active Directory site. The KCC usually connects the domain controller in a two-way ring. So that like this way, every domain controller can quickly pass update to its neighbor domain controller. Okay. So if there are like many domain controller, the KCC creates a few extra connections. So just like a school coordinator asking a few students to take shortcuts so the announcement reaches everyone faster. You can think like connecting several cities with a minimum number of roads needed. Okay. Similarly, like every city can still receive deliveries, but there is no unnecessary roads which saves money and reduce traffic. Now let's see what is failover functionality. So one of the best features of the KCC is that it does not stop working after creating the topology. It continuously checks the health of replications. Imagine like one domain controller suddenly goes offline because of hardware failure or a network problem. So instead of waiting for an administrator to fix everything, the KCC automatically creates temporary replication path using their other available domain controllers so that replications continues without any interruptions. So even if entire site become unavailable, Active Directory can establish new replications routes through another sites whenever possible. So this makes the replications process highly reliable. Okay, and avoids the like downtime. So this that's how like failover functionalities work. Now let's understand like what is sites and subnet. We can see like how Active Directory knows which domain controller are physically close to each other. So that this is done using sites and subnets. Here, subnet is simply a range of IP addresses. For example, you can see here 10.1.0.0/24 is one subnet, and 10.2.5.0/24 is another. So here a site is a logical grouping of one or more subnet that have like fast and reliable network connectivity. So when a domain controller starts, Active Directory checks its IP addresses and matches it to the appropriate subnet. So and based on that subnet, automatically determines like which site that domain controller belongs to. For example, if a domain controller has IP address 10.1.0.25, Active Directory matches it to the 10.1.0.0/24 subnet and knows that it belongs to that site. Okay, so that this helps Active Directory optimize replications traffic and also ensure like user authenticate with the closest available domain controller. So that's the importance of sites and subnet. Okay. Now let's move to the next topic, that is like site links. So let's understand like what is site links. So before we understand site links, let's first look at two types of Active Directory replications. Like the first is intra-site replications and second is like inter-site replication. So in the intra-site replications is the replications that happens between domain controller within the same Active Directory site. For example, imagine your Delhi office has three domain controller. This is 01, this is 02, and this is 03. If a user password is changed on this is 01, that changes is quickly replicated to this is 02 and this is 03 because all three domain controller in the same site and are connected by a fast and reliable local network. Since the network is fast, Active Directory assumes that bandwidth is not a concern. So replications happens frequently to keep all domain controllers synchronized. Okay, and the second type is inter-site replication. So this is the replications that happens between domain controller located in different Active Directory sites. For example, if a password changed in Delhi site, that changes must also be sent to the Mumbai site. Unlike intra-site replications, this communication usually happens over a wide area network. which may be slower or have limited bandwidth. To avoid unnecessary network traffic, Active Directory can schedule and optimize the inter-site applications. Now the next question is, how does Active Directory know that the Delhi side and the Mumbai side are allowed to replicate with each other? So that's where site links comes in. Okay. Now suppose you have domain controller in two different offices, such as Delhi and Mumbai. How does Active Directory know that these two sites should replicate with each other? That's where our site list comes in. A site link is a logical connections that an administrator create between two or more Active Directory sites. It tells Active Directory that replication is allowed between those sites and define the paths for inter-replications. A site link does not represent the physical cable or router or the actual network route. It's simply the logical replications path used by Active Directory. For example, imagine the Delhi side has 3 domain controller and the Mumbai side has also 3 domain controller. So instead of all 6 domain controller communicating directly across the WAN, Active Directory selects one domain controller in each side to handle inter-site replication. These selected domain controllers are called bridgehead server. Okay. So once the site link is in place, the knowledge consistency checker or KCC automatically selects the bridgehead server and create the necessary replications connections between them. Here the bridgehead server extends replications data between sites and then each bridgehead site server says those changes with other domain controller inside its own site. This reduces the replication traffic and makes inter-site replications much more efficient. Okay, so that's how like site links work. Now let's understand what is site link breezes and transitivity. Imagine you have three Active Directory sites: Site A, Site B, and Site C. Site A is connected to Site B, and Site B is connected to Site C. Even though there is not a direct link between Site A and Site C, Active Directory can still replicate data between them by using Site B as an intermediate site. So the by default site links are transitive. This means Active Directory can combine multiple site links to create an indirect replication path. Think of it like traveling. If you can travel from Delhi to Mumbai and from Mumbai to Bangalore, you can also reach Bangalore from Delhi, even without a direct route. In the same way, Active Directory can replicate changes from site A to site C through site B. Okay, so in most environment, this happens automatically, so administrator don't need to configure anything. But in a more complex network where automatic bridging is not appropriate, administrator can manually create site link bridges to control exactly like how replications traffic flows between sites. Okay, so that's how like site link bridges works. Now let's understand what is global catalog server, or it is also known as GC. So a global catalog store a complete writable copy of its own domain. In addition, like store a partially read-only copy of every other domain in the forest. I mean, like why only a partial copy? Because storing every single attribute from every domain would consume a huge amount of storage and increase replication traffic. So instead, the global catalog store only the most commonly searched attributes so that this allow users and applications to search the entire forest very quickly without needing to know which domain controller actually contains the informations. So the global catalog is also very important during user logon. especially when universal security groups are involved. Okay, so this is kind of a database of Active Directory. Now let's understand the another one, that is universal group membership. So not every branch office needs its own global catalog server. Like in a smaller locations, deploying another global catalog may not be necessary. So instead, Active Directory offers features called Universal Group Membership Caching. The first time a user logs in, the local domain controller contacts a global catalog server to retrieve the user's universal group membership. It then stores this information locally for future logins. As a result, the next time the user sign in, authentications becomes much faster because the domain controller already has the required group membership information. This reduces like WAN traffic and improves the user experience. For example, imagine your company's main office in Delhi has a global catalog server, while a small branch office in Jaipur has only a domain controller. The first time a user logs on in the Jaipur office, the domain controller retrieves the user universal group membership from the global catalog in Delhi and then store them locally. The next time that user logs on, the domain controller can use the cached informations without contacting Delhi again. Okay. So that's how like universal group memberships plays an important role in Active Directory. Okay. So now let's quickly review what we have learned today. Active Directory use multi-master applications, meaning every writable domain controller can accept changes. Connection object defines one-way inbound replications path. The knowledge consistency checker or KCC automatically creates and manages the replications topology. Site subnet and site link self Active Directory understands show network and optimize replications. Okay. Site link transitivity allows replications across multiple connected sites. The global catalog server enables fast forest wide searches and supports user authentication. And finally, universal group membership caching improves logon performance in branch office without requiring a global catalog. Okay.